Did you know that the Sloan Foundation supports authors in the research and writing of a wide range of books aimed at the public understanding of science and technology? Well, they do, and if you did go through the grants database, you'll find lots of previous books that they have funded. Now, I wondered, how do you get a grant like that? So I reached out to one of the authors that received such a grant, Jennifer Frazer, and asked her, well, a few questions. Well, okay, more than a few questions. What did she pitch? How many times was she rejected? What role did translation, perseverance, and unexpected deadlines play? Join me as we explore Jennifer's journey in the process of getting funded for a Sloan Foundation book titled The Slime Mold's Guide to World Domination. Yes, you heard me right. You don't want to miss this conversation. Mapping the ongoing work across the civic science landscape by characterizing the why, what, how, who, when, and where through talking directly with practitioners in academia, government, for-profit, and nonprofit organizations. I'm Fanuel Muindi, and this is Questions of the Day. Previously on Questions of the Day.
So the idea behind this project is to basically talk to basic scientists, which is wonderful because they do a lot of really cool stuff. So it'd be very fun to talk to them. But specifically basic scientists who are trying to incorporate this sort of ethical dimension into their work, the folks who are thinking about this kind of stuff in terms of, what might the downstream impacts of my science, what might those impacts be? Not only just in terms of like what I find out, what I publish, what comes of the work that I'm doing, but even in terms of the process of the research itself, the questions that are being asked, how the data is being collected and analyzed, what materials are being used. As we know, like there are basic scientists out there in the world who are thinking about these things and attempting to grapple with them. What we're really interested to do is find them, talk to them, write up case studies about how they're approaching this, how they're seeking to learn more about the ethical implications, how they figure out in the first place whether there might be ethical implications of their research, and then also how they're taking these insights that they find out through whichever approach they take, and how they're bringing it back to their research.
Subscribe to access that conversation and many more. Jennifer Frazer, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So can you just take us back to the genesis of the Slime Mold's Guide to World Domination? How did this idea come about?
Well, I was in graduate school in plant pathology, which is the study of plant diseases, and which I had picked because really as a stalling tactic, because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with my life yet. I had realized that I didn't want to be a lab scientist because I didn't want to spend decades studying effectively one topic. I needed more variety in my work life. And I picked plant pathology because there's a whole lot of weird little things that attack plants. And I was very interested in these weird little things. Their diversity, their beauty, their life cycles, how they go about approaching the world in ways that are wildly different from other life forms. And while I was in graduate school, a very famous paper by a Japanese scientist named Toshiyuki Nakagaki came out. And it basically showed that slime about in grad school because for a long time, people thought they were fungi, and fungi attack plants. So they were kind of adopted by mycologists. And his paper showed that slime molds could solve mazes. And that exploded my mind. I think it exploded a lot of other people's minds because slime molds are giant crawling cells. One cell that is so big that you can see it and touch it and even smell it. Like people think they have pretty nice smells, believe it or not. And I was just fascinated by this. I thought at the time, I want to write a book about this one day. And I think it was then that I even came up with the title that I now have, The Slime Mold's Guide to World Domination. But I knew that if I was going to become a book author, I had a lot of prep work to do because you can't just graduate from grad school and go write books, right? You have to pay dues as a writer and get experience as a writer. So after I finished grad school one, I enrolled in grad school too for science writing. I got a master's degree in science writing. And then I went off to pay my dues by becoming a newspaper reporter. I worked as a health and environment reporter at a newspaper in Wyoming. And then I took a job as a science writer for the National Center for Atmospheric Research. And then I started a blog that was ultimately picked up by Scientific American. Mm-hmm. And I spent 9 years writing that blog. And what was really great about it was it gave me the opportunity to practice ingesting scientific journal articles and then writing about them in an entertaining fashion in my own voice. And having a strong voice is one of the things I think book publishers most look for. They really value authors that have a unique voice that readers are drawn to. So I got a lot of practice building the skills I would need to write books while I was writing that blog. And then I did that for 9 years and they closed the blog network. And that was kind of the universe kicking me in the pants and saying, okay, time to write that book. So I started working on the book proposal. Actually, I had been working on the book proposal, but this gave me the impetus to finish it. And here we are.
Wow. So it's been years in the making.
Decades.
Literally. So grad school too, I want to go to that. So this was at MIT, the graduate program in science writing. Tell us why you decided to go there.
Well, they had just started the program back when I was in grad school, and I was in the second class. And I think I applied. Did I apply anywhere else? No, I think I just applied to that one. Just thinking, well, I'll give this a try. I think I knew, I had a friend who was in grad school at MIT already in biology. And so that was appealing to me because there was someone I knew who was already there. And I applied and got in. I had already done I think it was while I was waiting to hear from them, I had got an internship at Harvard Medical School, working for one of their in-school sort of publications. And so I was already in Boston, and that made things easy. I just stayed over the summer and then started school in the fall.
Yeah. So, these ideas, they take a while to marinate, and finally actually having ideas on paper, right? It's a whole process. I was wondering if you can just walk us through that. So you started writing, the proposal started coming together, right? Because the process is you write this proposal, you submit it to a few agents, actually, right? And so just tell us about that. Like what happened in that as things started to take shape on paper?
So I was terrified of writing a book, even though I wanted to write a book and I knew I wanted to write a book. I was just like, I don't know how to write a book. No one ever taught me how to write a book, even in grad school, right? Like at MIT, we learned how to, write newspaper articles and magazine articles. But like a book is just so much more than that, that like it was only a 1-year program. There's just not time to really talk about how to write a book. And I've always been one of those people who's like, I want to know every step before I start this process so I can be sure I can do it exactly right. And that there was just pure terror. And I kept putting off writing the proposal because of this fear. Even though once I got my blog at Scientific American, I had agents coming to me and being like, do you have any book ideas? And I was like, well, actually,
so
yes.
they were coming to you at that time, at least. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, because I think there's a real thirst in the publishing industry for people who are qualified to write science books. There just aren't that many. And so if you have those skills, that is a commodity that they are looking for. So the other problem was I did acquire an agent when I first started the blog, and I did start working on a proposal at that time. But that agent and I didn't quite have meshing visions for the book. Every agent has like a stable of editors that they work with, and they know what those editors are looking for, and they want proposals that will, make those editors excited. And I think what I had in mind for the book just wasn't quite fitting with that. So I put it off and I put it on the back burner for like 5 years. And I had a friend who works in science communication as an instructor and teacher. And he said, you know, you're established enough as a science writer. You should just start writing the book. And like, you should write until you feel confident enough that you can finish it and then get the proposal and the contract together. And that was like my little magic Dumbo feather that I needed to like, because let me tell you, signing a book contract, another moment of pure terror, because like you've signed on the dotted line and like you've said you're going to deliver X by X date and you have no idea exactly how you're going to get there or do it in time, you know? So by the time I got around to finishing the proposal, I had written 2 whole chapters. And I could kind of see like, oh, you know, I think I know what I'm doing now, or at least I know what I'm doing enough to like finish this book. So at that point, I reapproached my agent with the 2 chapters. It took a month to get back to me and let me know she wasn't interested. Again, different visions. Then I moved on to another agent, did the same thing. She was interested, took another month to get back to me, and then told me she wasn't interested. And at this point, I realized it was a mistake to approach one agent at a time. Major pro tip here. Approach 3 to 5 agents at a time, because if one of them gets back to you with a yes, it kind of like helps the others move a little faster, you know? And then I went to agents 3, 4, and 5 and got 2 more no's and a yes. It was actually agent 3 that finally told me yes. And I had the 2 sample chapters ready to go. And then we worked together to do the rest of the parts of the proposal. And then he shopped it to editors.
Wow, wow. So perseverance, I think, is order of the day. I'm curious, Jennifer, did you engage others, like in terms of scientists or potential audiences that were your target audiences, right? That are going to read the book. Did you do this part in writing the proposal, and what were they telling you that kind of gave you even a boost, perhaps, right, to say I'm going to write this proposal and submit it to these agents?
In terms of, what do you mean by in terms of audiences? Like,
So, like, who's the target audience for the book, and it's another way to say the
yes.
question. And did you talk to
Right.
them in that writing process?
So for a science book, the audience is the repeat science book buyer. That is the audience that you need to primarily target, because those are the people that buy most of the science books. But even from the very beginning, I knew I wanted to focus on way more than just the repeat science book buyer. I wanted to reach basically anyone with any curiosity from bright teenagers on. When I was writing the sample chapters and the whole book really, and the proposal, I tried to write it in a way that the people who had biology degrees wouldn't be bored by long passages of information they already know. Because I've read science books like that. I'm like, I already know this. Why are you wasting my time? But I also wanted to write it in a way that people who don't have science degrees wouldn't feel lost or left behind. So I was very conscious about writing everything that way from the very beginning.
I see. Because part of the challenge, I think, is who's your target audience, right? And nowadays, it's difficult. People are, I think, is if you don't have a target audience, it kind of makes it very difficult to sort of get down to an audience. So I want to go back to you getting all these no's at the beginning, at least, right, from book agents until that final list. I mean, was there a point in time where you thought, okay, maybe this is not a good idea, and I should change my approach, or like what
Yes,
how
there
do how
were
do
definitely moments like that.
yeah, tell us about one or two of them.
There were, when the Scientific American Blog Network closed down, there was definitely a moment there where I thought, is science writing even for me? Like, I legitimately considered becoming a native plant landscaper at that point. And there were previous points in my career when I left my newspaper job where I thought maybe I should be a nurse, you know, like something that pays a stable, high income that, you know, uses science skills. But in the agent process, yeah, there were, I think I definitely had a good cry after the second agent told me no, because she had pointed out something in my proposal that needed a fix. And I, rightly so, she had asked me, well, what's the engine of your book? Because I just thought I was going to write a straight up natural history in the beginning. And I thought about it. I thought, she's right. This needs an engine. let's make it a mystery. Let's frame it as this deep question, like, how can a giant crawling cell possibly be intelligent? And then let's look at its natural history to look for clues, and then solve it to the extent we can at the end of the book. And I came back to her with this idea, all excited, like, I had this great idea. This is how we can do it. And she still said no after all that. And I was just like, oh my God, this is 2 in a row. But I still wasn't ready to give up because, this is 2 no's in the world of fiction. That's like nothing. I mean, if you talk to the fiction authors, they go through dozens of agents before they get a yes. So like, I was gonna hang in there at least for 10 or 15 agents before I gave up.
So you really need a thick skin, right? A thick skin.
You do, but I mean, that's part of a writer, right? Like,
right.
To pitch articles. I have a sign on my wall that says embrace rejection. And I think you have to have a little bit of a startup mentality with the rejection thing, because getting rejected is a sign that you tried, and trying is the way to succeed. So it's hard. I try not to take it personally, but it is part of the deal when you're a writer.
Yeah. So fast forward, you get the yes, right? The agent is interested. Now the next step, and tell me if I'm wrong, is to now shop it around to a publisher, right? So tell us about that part.
Yeah, exactly. So most writers who become authors will tell you the hardest part is getting an agent, because the agent won't say yes unless they know editors they're pretty sure they can sell it to. So once you have an agent, it's a good sign that you're probably going to sell the book, because they don't want to invest energy in a project that isn't likely to sell. So I wrote the proposal. It didn't take, God, the proposal, it'd been such this huge thing in my mind, so scary. And then once I actually sat down to write it, it only took like 3 or 4 weeks and I was done. And then we edited on it for like a month. And then we shopped it, I think it was mid-January. And I had an editor already interested 2 days after he put it out for submission. That's a good sign when they get back that quickly. He had sent it to, my agent had sent it to 3 editors, and ultimately 2 of them ended up making bids. And one of them offered me a preempt, which I was pretty excited about. A preempt is where an editor says, I will give you more money to take it off the table so it doesn't go to auction, where they have to compete. I ultimately decided to go to auction, and the first editor who had responded within 2 days was the one who ultimately won.
I see.
And
I see.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's. I mean, again, these are wonderful details, but to just know the intricate details behind the scenes, right, leading up to actually the writing. So you at this point you have the 2 chapters, right? Because you submitted the sample chapters. You have a agent, you have now a publisher in mind, but you didn't stop there. You kept going, right? You actually then sought out, and tell me how this kind of came about. You found the Sloan Foundation, and there was of course they have this book proposal grant that they have. How did you find the Sloan Foundation opportunity, and tell us about that process?
Yeah, this is something I really want other people to know about, because I didn't know about it. And neither my editor and my agent didn't tell me about it either, even though they knew I had some financial needs regarding this book. So one of the things I knew was going to be an issue from the beginning was that I needed a Japanese translator, I needed a German translator, and later on I found out I also needed Latin and Polish. And where's the money for that going to come from? Like, when you get a book advance, they only give you a quarter of it up front, which doesn't end up being much. And then on top of that, my husband was out of work at the time, and we just needed some money to live on. So I ended up finding out about it because I joined a science writing book group where it's called Authors of Nonfiction Books in Progress. And we meet up once a month to kind of talk about where we are in our book process and share wisdom and advice. And the organizer of the group mentioned it at a meeting, and I was just like, what? Because I needed money to help support my book, and here was, you know, potentially $50,000 to help me write this book and pay for my translations. But I was already like, you know, well into the process when that happened. So it ended up being not as big of a roadblock as I thought it was when I first found out about it. But the Sloan process is long. It ended up taking 9 months from the time that I started working on the application till when I finally got an answer. So my biggest advice to people is to start early and take your time. It's a long application and it requires a lot of supporting materials. And there's a lot of steps in the process. So if Sloan doesn't respond to you by, you know, a posted deadline where they say they will, then be polite and persistent in following up with them. And my other piece of advice is, if you know someone who has won a Sloan Award or admire someone who's won a Sloan Award, reach out to them and ask them for advice. That was another piece of advice I got in the book group, and it was excellent advice.
Yeah. And you're giving it right now too, right? To those others that are going to be listening to this, the scientists who may be interested, right? Writing these books like this.
Totally.
So you mentioned 9 months, Jennifer. 9 months. You are persevering through all sorts of things here. How did you persevere for 9 months, and what did they need, by the way, if you can just quickly share those requirements?
So there's a lot of forms you have to fill out that have to do with, you know, where the money goes. If you win it, you have to write a budget. You have to submit your book proposal, and then I think you have to write a statement of interest and some other. There's a lot.
Yeah.
And this is why it really helps to reach out to talk to people who've done it before, because they can kind of coach ins and outs.
And we'll share the link down below as well for people, because they do.
Yeah,
They do
you also
several
need to
different
submit articles that you've, you know, previously published work, which is where it helps to have, you know, experience as a science writer or a published author in some capacity. And then I believe I submitted a sample chapter as well. It ended up being something like 60 or 70 pages. It's a lot.
Yeah. And at this time, again, are you writing the book at this point in time also, because the book has to keep moving forward, right? I was wondering if you can share.
I took a month out of writing the book to deal with the Sloan application.
I see.
But
I see.
in my head, I was thinking, you know, if I get this, it's $50,000. It's pretty good pay for a month. So.
And so if you didn't get the grant, would that have impeded the book? Just give us that sense.
It would not have. It definitely would not helped, because I would have had to pay for those translations out of my own pocket, and you know, we would have been cutting that much closer to the bone to survive, you know, with our living expenses, because, you know, as I said, 1/4 of my book advance wasn't a lot. We were already living on savings at the time. It would have been doable, but winning the Sloan grant was such a psychological boost. And it really did help me feel like I was contributing to feeding my family and, you know, earning the ability to write my book. So, and obviously, you know, it brought me to you. I think that's how you found out about my book too. So there's other intangibles that come with winning a Sloan.
Yeah. So you mentioned translation. Just tell us a little bit about that. The what translation for what exactly?
So the guy who I mentioned who did the slime mold maze solving experiment, Toshiyuki Nakagaki, he speaks English, but not well, which I don't speak Japanese. So like, you know, even a little bit of English is great. But in order to get the kind of quotes that I wanted for a high quality narrative nonfiction book, I knew that I would prefer if I could interview him in Japanese, if he could give me his answers in Japanese, and then have them translated professionally back into English. And I didn't quite know how to make that work until someone suggested, why don't you just do it in writing? Because that will give him time to think through everything. That is not usually done in journalism, but I thought that given the extenuating circumstances and the language barrier, that it was appropriate for this situation, because it also enabled my translators to take their time and have like the printed document with the kanji that they could review and, you know, translate to the best of their ability. So the Japanese was done in writing. from questions I had translated into Japanese and emailed him.
I see. So you get this grant in 2024, I believe, right? The beginning, the end. Tell us when in 2024 did you get this?
I found out at the end of February.
End of
And then I
February.
think I got the first payment in May.
I see. So it's in process right now because there's no. It's unclear if it's a time limit. Is it a year? Is it 2 years? What's the time frame?
You do have to put dates on your proposal of like when you propose to use the money and over what time period. This is all part of the whole budget process. But they are not, as far as I can tell, as long as you're working hard and making progress, you have, excuse me, you do have to submit an interim report and tell them where you are in the book writing. Excuse me. And, if you don't quite make the time frame that you originally gave them, I don't think they're going to kick you out and demand their money back. So I'm just trying to work on the book as fast as I can.
Yeah. So tell us where you are right now in that process with the book.
I am on the next to last chapter. I'm getting towards the end of the next to last chapter. This chapter has been the biggest challenge of any of the chapters I've written so far because it is the beginning of the solution to the mystery that I set up at the beginning. And this particular chapter, unlike any of the other chapters in the book, could be its own book. So I'm having to comb through the amount of material that I would be doing, that I would need to look through for a book, but condense that down into just a chapter because I'm not writing that book. I'm writing the slime mold book. So that has been quite difficult, and it's taken me longer than any of the previous chapters have taken. But I'm nearing the end of that process, and when I finish this current chapter, I will only have one to go. And that feels kind of amazing after, 2 years now? I've been working on this since I got the contract.
Yeah, I mean, it's the finish line is getting close, right?
Yes, the light at the end of the tunnel is becoming more visible, although I try not to think about it that way. I live in Colorado, and one of the things I like to do is climb mountains. And if you've ever climbed a mountain, you know that false summits are a thing where you're like, oh, there's the top. And then you get to the thing you thought was the top and you discover you have another 1,000 feet to go. So I've tried very hard to just focus on one day at a time. And today I will take the next step and trust that if I keep taking next steps, eventually I'll get to the top.
Yeah. Now, you've been sharing a lot of advice, Jennifer, to other aspiring science writers. If you were, I want to focus on those like science writers, freelance science writers out there, and there's quite a few of them, many of whom you probably know. Through what advice would you give them through this process of yours, right? You mentioned there are these grants that are out there, right? And I think Sloan is rather unique in having this targeted amount like this, right? Other foundations, maybe you have to kind of dig around and see if a book will be a project, right? And then the perseverance you talked about earlier. I mean, goodness me, you have layers of skin here, and there's some things we didn't discuss also that you've gone through before, having a child, right? Earlier on. What advice comes to the top of your mind right now as you reflect on your experiences so far writing this book?
Yeah. I really want to encourage all science writers to consider writing a book. There is a great thirst for science books, and there aren't enough people to write them who are qualified. So I want you to think about it. Even if you don't know how to write the book, consider it seriously. And, if you're having trouble, just start writing and see how you like it and see how far you get. That was probably the best piece of advice I got. And I don't think I would be here sitting here talking to you today if I had not done that first. I needed to believe. So get to the point where you can believe. And then the second thing I would say is make sure that you have a topic that you're utterly passionate about, because to persist for years on a project, you need to really be jazzed about whatever it is you want to write your book about. So if you have something that you're just kind of like, well, this is kind of cool, that is not enough. It has to be something that you're just like, the world has to know about this, and I am the person to tell them. And then the second thing is educate yourself about writing nonfiction books. Read a book about how to write a nonfiction book. The one that I really like is called Thinking Like Your Editor. But there are others out there. The other thing is read nonfiction books. I've kind of been amazed by how many other science writers I've talked to who've written books that didn't read other nonfiction books. Like, I wanted to know, what is it that I love and what is it that I hate? And the best way to do that is to read nonfiction and find out how you react to the material. And if you read something that you think is great, ask yourself, why do I think this is great? The last thing is, go to Goodreads and look up books that you either love or hate and read the 2 and 3 star reviews, because I almost think that has been my best teacher is hearing what people are complaining about when they read nonfiction books. I have a folder, a Word doc full of these like pieces of advice that readers have given about things that really ticked them off that book authors have done. Free advice. So
Lots of free advice. And Jennifer, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the AI, right? That is out there, especially you mentioned start writing. I mean, AI is helping in that part as well. What are your thoughts around that and its utility here for authors, book authors in this case?
I speak only for myself. I avoid it like the plague.
Okay.
I don't want it infecting my voice. My voice is the most valuable thing I own. It's what makes me unique. It's what makes me human. I think it will be what draws people to read me as opposed to anyone else. And I also don't want it to handicap my skills. I feel like once you start relying on a crutch, you get used to the crutch and your brain stops exercising itself and, weakens. I think there's some evidence out there that already suggests that this happens with AI among students. And I almost put it like I have a religious objection to AI. I also don't like the fact that they built it on stolen authors' works. And I think that's wrong. You need to offer compensation and you need to get permission. So I have a lot of reasons for avoiding it, but I don't use it and I never will.
Yeah. And in your Substack, I think you put no AI training, right? Kind of like a notice at the top there without permission, right? For example.
And everyone's free to come to their own conclusions. That's just mine.
Of course. So if you were talking to your target audience, Jennifer, and my last question here, the book is out, let's say the future now, pitch them the book, kind of like why should they go ahead and buy it or check it out? So what would you tell them?
So if you want to laugh and you want to read a really interesting mystery about slime molds, then you should buy this book. Because even though I knew when I started to write this book, I've still been blown away by all the extraordinary, abilities that slime molds have that were buried in the archive and I dug up. So, if you like to laugh, if you like surprises, if you like a mystery, you should buy this book.
Jennifer, we look to having you back when the book is out because we would love to talk to you some more. We barely scratched the surface here. So thank you for sharing these insights.
You're absolutely welcome. Thank you for having me.